Imagine you could freeze the last second of your life, not slow it down, freeze it completely, and inside that one frozen second, you had the ability to experience an entire lifetime. Every memory, every face, every version of yourself you've ever been. All of it, unfolding inside a single tick of the clock. Now here's the question that should unsettle you. What if that's already exactly what happens? There is something happening inside the human brain in its final moments that science has only recently begun to uncover. Something so strange, so structurally bizarre, that it doesn't just challenge what we think about death. It challenges what we think about time itself. Because if the research is correct, and we'll get to why correct is a complicated word here, then the end of time isn't something that happens to the universe. It's something that happens inside you, personally, privately, in a way no one else can witness or measure. And the strangest part, we have no idea how long it lasts. Let's start with a moment most people have never thought carefully about. Right now, as you watch this, you are experiencing time as a continuous flow, one moment following the next, a clean, unbroken river of now. But that experience, that sense of smooth, forward-moving time, is not a feature of the universe. It's a construction. Your brain is building it, frame by frame, the way a projector builds a film from a sequence of still images. You don't experience reality directly. You experience a version of it that your mind assembles slightly after the fact, stitched together from electrical signals, chemical reactions, and a staggering amount of unconscious prediction. Time, as you feel it, is an edited production. So, what happens when the editor goes offline? In 2023, a team of neuroscientists published findings from a study that had started almost by accident. A patient undergoing brain monitoring for epilepsy suffered a fatal heart attack during the procedure. For the first time in history, researchers had a real-time, high-resolution recording of a human brain in the moments surrounding death. And what they found has quietly rewritten the conversation about what happens at the end. In the seconds before and after the heart stopped, the brain did not go quiet. It didn't fade to static. It surged. Specific brainwave patterns associated with high-level cognitive processing. The same patterns recorded during dreaming, during memory recall, during moments of intense conscious experience, spiked dramatically. The brain appeared to become, in some measurable sense, more active at the edge of death than it had been in the hours before it. Now pause on that, because this raises a question that no one can answer yet. If the brain is flooding itself with the neural equivalent of a greatest hits reel in its final moments, what is the subjective experience of that? What does it feel like from the inside? Is there an inside at all? This is where science runs into a wall it cannot climb. We can measure electrical signals. We can map brainwaves. We can identify which regions light up and which go dark. But consciousness, the raw, first-person experience of being someone, remains stubbornly unmeasurable. We don't have an instrument for it. We can't run it through a scanner. And so the most important question, what is happening experientially in those final seconds, sits just outside the reach of everything we know how to do, which means the only data we have comes from people who came close. Near-death experiences have been documented across cultures for centuries, dismissed for most of that time as hallucination, oxygen deprivation, or wishful thinking. But something has always resisted that easy explanation. The consistency across different countries, different religions, different ages, people who come to the edge of death and return describe the same things. The tunnel, the light, the overwhelming sense of life review, and most strangely, the distortion of time. People who have been clinically dead for minutes frequently report experiences that felt like hours. Some report what feels like entire lifetimes. A man resuscitated after drowning described watching his childhood unfold scene by scene with a clarity sharper than any memory he could access while alive. A woman whose heart stopped on an operating table described a conversation with a deceased relative that, by her account, lasted several days, in what the medical team recorded as 47 seconds of cardiac arrest. 47 seconds. Several days. How is that possible? And more importantly, is it? Here's where things get genuinely strange. Because time, even in physics, is not as rigid as we assume. Einstein showed us that time bends under gravity, stretches with velocity, and runs at different rates in different parts of the universe. Two clocks at different altitudes tick at measurably different speeds. Time is not a fixed track. It's a landscape. And if physical time can warp in response to mass and motion, what does subjective time, time as felt by a conscious mind, do under extreme neurological conditions? We have partial answers, and they are deeply unsettling. Research on psychological time distortion shows that subjective time is far more elastic than we realize. Under extreme stress, time slows. Athletes in peak performance states describe actions unfolding with impossible clarity. Trauma survivors often report that catastrophic events seem to stretch across minutes when they occurred in seconds. The brain, when flooded with adrenaline and pushed to its processing limits, appears to expand its temporal resolution, fitting more experience into less clock time. Now, scale that up. Push the brain not to its performance limit, but to its absolute physiological limit. Flood it with every neurotransmitter simultaneously. Trigger every memory network at once. What happens to time then? We don't know. But the near-death report suggests something extraordinary. And the neural evidence suggests the brain is, at minimum, doing something during those final moments that it doesn't do at any other point in a person's life. Which leads us to a possibility that most scientists won't say out loud. What if dying takes longer than we think? Not in clock time. Clock time ends cleanly enough. But in subjective time, in the only kind of time that consciousness has ever actually lived in. What if the final moments expand outward in ways that make the question, how long did it last, completely unanswerable? What if the last second of a life, experienced from the inside, has no clear end? There is a philosophical concept worth sitting with here. The philosopher Derek Parfit spent decades thinking about personal identity and the nature of the self at the boundary of existence. He concluded that the self is not a fixed thing. It's a process, a constantly updating narrative that the brain tells about itself. And narratives, unlike clocks, don't have hard stops. They trail off, they loop, they lose their edges. If the self is a story and the brain is the storyteller, then what happens when the storyteller loses power mid-sentence? Does the story end, or does it simply never reach a period? This is the part where the science runs out and the questions get louder. Because here's the implication no one is comfortable sitting with. If subjective time can expand indefinitely under the right neurological conditions, and dying may represent the most extreme neurological event a brain will ever undergo, then the concept of the end of time looks completely different from the inside than it does from the outside. From the outside, you have a date, a time, a certificate, a clean termination point. From the inside, if these theories are correct, you may have something that has no termination point at all. Not because you survive, but because the experience itself may have no experiential floor. Think about that for a moment. Really sit with it. The end of your time, the thing you've been taught to imagine as a door slamming shut, might be, from the only perspective that matters, a room with no walls. And we haven't even gotten to the deepest layer yet. Because there is a line of thinking emerging from the intersection of neuroscience and quantum biology that suggests consciousness may not be a product of the brain in the way we've always assumed, that it may be something the brain participates in rather than generates. Researchers like Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff have proposed, controversially, and to significant skepticism, that quantum processes inside neurons may tie consciousness to structures of space-time itself. That when a brain stops, what it was doing may not simply cease, but may collapse into the underlying fabric of reality in ways we don't have language for yet. This is the edge of fringe science. The proposals are contested, the evidence is thin, and most mainstream neuroscientists keep their distance from it. But the question it raises doesn't go away just because the answer is uncertain. What if consciousness is not something the brain creates and the universe witnesses? What if it's the other way around? What if you are not inside the universe? What if the universe is, in some sense, inside you? And if that's even partially true, if consciousness is something the cosmos does through us rather than something our neurons produce in isolation, then the end of a conscious experience is not a local event. It ripples. It matters to the fabric of things in ways that a purely material account of death cannot capture. We are not close to understanding this. We may never be. The hard problem of consciousness, why there is something it is like to be you, remains the deepest unsolved problem in all of science. We can map every neuron in your brain and still have no idea why any of it feels like anything. That gap between the physical description and the lived experience is where the most important questions about the end of time actually live. If you find yourself drawn to questions like these, the ones that sit at the border between science and the unknown, between what we can measure and what we can only wonder at, then Cosmora is where those questions live. Consider subscribing. There are layers to reality we've barely begun to pull back. But before we close, there's one final thought. One that doesn't resolve. One that is meant to stay with you. Every person who has ever lived has approached this moment. Every consciousness that has ever flickered into existence. Every mind that has loved something, feared something, remembered something, has moved toward its own subjective last moment. And in that moment, something happened that no instrument has ever captured, no witness has ever seen, and no language has ever quite contained. We call it death. We put it on certificates. We assign it a time. But what if the experience itself, the raw, first-person fact of it, is something that doesn't fit inside the certificate? What if every mind that has ever reached that threshold stepped into a duration that, from the inside, had no last frame? You will reach that moment. Every person you love will reach that moment. And when you do, the clock everyone else is watching will say one thing. But you, if these ideas carry even a fragment of truth, may be somewhere else entirely. Somewhere time hasn't finished yet.